After the hardships of World War I, the United States resurged in the 1920s with a time period that we today call the Roaring Twenties. A lot was roaring. You have the new automobile, as well as other inventions such as electric irons, vacuum cleaners, and a list of just so many things that really excited people technologically, and it would change the social environment as well. People had more leisure time because of all of these new inventions. Many in New York went to Coney Island, which was a new place to have leisure time. It was an amusement park. In addition, people marveled over some new things such as air travel. Of course, in 1927, Charles Lindbergh becomes a hero when he flies across the Atlantic Ocean. He takes off from Long Island and he lands in Paris. Regarding Henry Ford's automobile, you should know about the Model T. It wasn't the most elegant car, but it was affordable, and it led to an increase in the middle class using the automobile to travel. The Model T was made through the assembly line, which broke up the process step by step, and everybody could become an expert on their particular step. This would lead to increased efficiency, known as scientific management. Scientific management was an idea that was brought forth by Frederick Winslow Taylor. Women changed a lot during this time period. Armed now with the right to vote, you have a new woman called the flapper. She pushed the envelope sexually. In addition, she had a new haircut called the bob, wore makeup, smoked, cursed, and fraternized with men whenever she could. This was a far cry from the Victorian age woman who wore long dresses and would not be caught alone in public with a man who was not her husband. Also during this time period, you have Margaret Sanger, who is outspoken for birth control. A lot is going to change in the 1920s for the African American population. There's a lot of internal migration. That means people moving within the country. The Great Migration refers to the large number of African Americans who travel out of the Jim Crow South and into the North. Millions are going to come over the next few decades. In New York City, there is going to be a large black cultural revival known as the Harlem Renaissance. It's going to contain dance and theater, poetry by Langston Hughes. In addition, you are going to see a new musical style called jazz. Jazz will become mainstream with the help of Louis Armstrong and other musicians. In terms of African American pride, you should know the Back to Africa movement by Marcus Garvey. That movement looked to go back to the roots of Africa and embrace the culture. However, unfortunately, there is going to be violence once African Americans get to the North. Even though they're trying to escape Jim Crow, they are met with violence from the KKK. The Ku Klux Klan has a revival after the movie A Birth of a Nation in the 19-teens. Many people are going to join the Klan at this time, and it will be bigger than it was during Reconstruction. The resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan also showed a lot of nativism or hatred of the new immigrants who came over. One example of nativism you're going to see is the Sacco Vanzetti case, when without great evidence, 2 Italians are executed for murder in the United States. There was a lot of protest against this decision. You can't talk about the Roaring Twenties unless you talk about the alcohol. But wasn't alcohol illegal because of the Prohibition Amendment? Well, it was, but people really didn't follow it. You would get speakeasies, which are these secret bars, as well as bathtub gin, and many other ways that people found a way around the amendment. The amendment was supposed to be enforced by the Volstead Act, but oftentimes it wasn't. There was a lot of corruption, as well as the rise of organized crime in places such as Chicago. All of the bootlegging and illegal drinking would eventually lead to the end of the amendment as it gets repealed in 1933 with the 21st Amendment. As social behavior began to change, so did traditional ideals. In Tennessee, there was the Scopes trial. John Scopes taught about the theory of evolution and was arrested for it. This became very controversial. You had the fundamentalists who believed in teaching things from the Bible directly, and you had the modernists who believed that science should win the day. The court case led to Scopes losing. However, in the court of public opinion, many sided with his lawyer, Clarence Darrow. During this case, by the way, William Jennings Bryan showed up, and he was the attorney against Scopes. He died shortly after the trial. Not everybody was so thrilled with the Roaring Twenties consumerism. A group of writers collectively known as the Lost Generation, such as Sinclair Lewis and Ernest Hemingway, they wrote about disillusionment with materialism and a nonconformist style of writing. This, of course, came after World War I, when there was a huge negative impact around the world. There was also scandal at this time. The Teapot Dome scandal, which happened under President Warren G. Harding, was a terrible one where public land was sold for private use. A guy by the name of Albert Fall took the fall and went to jail for this scandal. But the presidents weren't the ones who were really running the show during the 1920s. It was more so Congress. There are certain congressional items that occurred. For example, Native Americans did get citizenship in 1924. In addition, you are going to see loose practices when it comes to the stock market. There's a guy by the name of Andrew Mellon who's in charge of the Treasury, and he looks the other way when it comes to certain practices. Loose practices are going to catch up with the United States, as we are going to see how in 1929 the economy falls apart.